Our interview with Steve Hackett as we go track by track, well, almost track by track. We left out 2 songs. On his 3rd album and its 40th anniversary to Spectral Mornings. I'm John Beaudin from Rock History Music. I've said this many times on this channel and our sister channel, our big channel, Rock History Music. I love the evolution of an artist. I love asking an artist, where were you back then? What were you thinking about back then? If you could change things, what would you change? We go track by track, with the exception of 2 songs. I think we left out 2. From his 3rd album, released in 1979, Spectral Mornings.
As well as doing Selling England by the Pound, you're also doing the celebration, a tip of the hat to the 40th for Spectral Morning. With that album, Steve, who was the Steve Hackett recording that album as opposed to Voyage of the Acolyte, the first album? What were the difference between, you think, in you going into that 3rd album?
The difference between Voyage of the Acolyte, which was my first solo effort, where I was giving free rein to all sorts of ideas. By the time I was doing Spectral Mornings, several years later, I had my own touring band, and what an incredible band they were too. So there's a lot of their influence that is there on that album, and I think it's one of the very best. So playing these 3 albums live, certainly the whole of Selling England, and a substantial amount of Spectral, plus At the Edge of Light, they are all favorite albums of mine.
I always thought Every Day sounded like a hit. Like the chorus, almost to me, sounded like a tip of the hat to the 60s.
Possibly, yeah. There's just something about it, the way the harmonies work. I'm still pleased with the way that rings out. There's just something about the chord sequence that's behind it that I find it very difficult to play the chord sequence and sing the vocal on that. It's the same effect that Eric Clapton has when he does Layla, isn't it? You know, he has to have someone else to play that. So I have to have keyboard playing that while I sing those harmonies against it. But, you know, it's a little bit like Virgin and the Gypsy. The harmonies are not obvious at all, these sort of antiphonal, these sort of answering harmonies.
But it's really cool the way the lead vocal plays with the background vocals on that song.
Yes, it's one of the best I've done. I think that I was influenced by all sorts of things, you know, English folk music, and thinking about some of the changes that Joni Mitchell did with her songs, and thinking, you know, you can stick it in an unlikely chord, but if it's got a complementary harmony and something that links the 2 phrases that might go over, you know, an obvious change and then into an unobvious change, that would be something that I would have thought of as typical of her work. And of course, you get it in jazz, you get it in classical music. It's basically a folk song.
The Red Flower of the Tachai blooms. Were you inspired by a trip with that song?
Well, you know, it was when I got my first koto, Chinese harp, 5-note scale, I think 3 octaves. When I was thinking of that, I was listening to some Chinese music and thinking, you know, this is extraordinary stuff, and I want to capture the spirit of that, you know, because a lot of the Chinese music at the time was still very much Cultural Revolution stuff. There were all these marches, you know, it sounds a little bit like Hitler's stuff, you know. But I thought, yeah, but there's got to be another spirit of Chinese stuff, which is very, very lilting, very kind of, very poetic, very gentle. The kind of sighing sound that you get with the single-string violin. But I didn't know any single-string violin players, but we had a great synth player in Nick Magnus at the time, and so he was doing something that sounded a little bit like an Oriental soprano, and we doubled it with a number of instruments. We used mellotron, we used mellotron string, guitar, the koto playing it, and flute, and all those things playing back created this strange little orchestra of sounds. And funnily enough, that was remixed in recent years by Stephen Wilson. He did a very nice surround sound mix of it, which is on the Premonitions box set. Really, really good.
Clock's a rocker. Is inspired by not being able to stop. What was your inspiration?
Well, I think the idea on that was I was writing something which could be performed as a live number for that live band, which was playing tunes from previous albums that they hadn't been on. That really came up the idea of bass pedals. You know, people liked bass pedals, and people saying, oh, that really shakes the foundation when that happens. And so I thought, well, why not give the bass pedals a solo? The bass pedals get a solo, and that when we do it live, and when we did it live back then, yeah, you know, the building literally used to shake. I think the same thing will happen now. In fact, I think we've got the bass pedals on it's something that sounds like bass pedals played on keyboard, but it's still the same effect, that kind of very brassy, almost overdriven thing. But it's a kind of nod to Robert Moog, really.
The Ballad of the Decomposing Man reminded me again, and I like when you do this, you tip the hat to a period, sentimental institution from Defector. But tell me about the Ballad of Decomposing Man.
It's kind of end of the pier British stuff. It's British humour, and I think I was trying to do George Formby. I wasn't quite sober when I sang it, so it's one of those things. It was just a party one night. Indeed, much of Spectral was like that. We were recording this in freezing temperatures in Holland in 1979, and it was extraordinary, really. It was freezing. Frozen lakes, 15 degrees below zero. People were driving cars on the lake. That's how cold it was. We had to do something to keep warm and sane, and so we had a ball doing that album. We kind of let rip throughout the whole thing and just enjoyed ourselves. And at the end of it, of course, I could barely stand up. But I had a great time doing it. I don't suggest everyone does that themselves. You can have a great time making an album. You can get drunk on just the music alone. But at that time, we were a bunch of young guys, and we were on our own. And I think you can sense that there was a party atmosphere on that album. I like to think there's an extraordinary energy on it. I think we were being totally ourselves.
Someone I noticed online had asked you if you're going to do Tigermoth. That song really takes me on a journey.
Yeah, well, we do a version of Tigermoth, but we do the instrumental version, which is one that I was doing in the late 70s, I think, or maybe the early 80s. It seems to work live better as an instrumental than it does as a vocal, because I think its strength is in the lyric, the idea of the airman who is blown up and wonders why he's still alive. So it's a kind of complicated story, but again, it begs the question of, is there an afterlife? And I come down on the side of saying there is, having researched it in as much as one can without passing over the threshold yourself. There's just something about it. So I think it's a very strong lyric, but I think as a song, it's got an aspect of almost jokey again, the kind of drinking song aspect. And I don't think it's as strong a song, but I think the instrumental parts are extremely portentous. So we do it a little bit like a kind of malevolent Sugar Plum Fairy, little tinkly bits and then really loud bits with the roaring Mellotron choir as it was back in the day.
The title song to me is still one of my favorite songs that you've ever done.
Yeah, I think that originally it was written as a vocal tune, and I hadn't finished lyrics, and I was showing the melody to the guys, and I was playing it on guitar, and everybody in the band said, it sounds really good on guitar, why don't you play it on guitar? And so I thought, oh well, to do that it'll have to be more robust to survive that. I looked again to Nick Magnus, who had this magnificent, huge pipe organ sound. He had this early string synthesizer. I'm trying to remember if it was, I think it was called the Vox string thing. And I said to him, look, have you got a sound that sounds like pipe organ? And he said, yeah, it just so happens I've hooked up all the octaves on this, and it sounds like this. And he played these magnificent, huge chords. And I think that's what really clinched the deal with me working with him. So the first track we recorded on Spectral is the title track, and it's that organ. In fact, we're going to do it with the full introduction as well. We've been practicing that, and that sounds beautiful as well. So you get the contrast, and also with Selling England by the Pound, we include the missing track that Peter Gabriel started, and I finished with his blessing years later, the track called Deja Vu. So when we put it all together, it's a bit like the complete Selling England by the Pound, and like the director's cut, the missing scene restored for your delectation.
We have a track-by-track special on his brand new album, At the Edge of Light, also on this channel. Check that out. Also, we have a special on the top 25 Genesis songs based on a poll we had a few years ago, and the top Genesis albums of all times. There's a few surprises in those. And of course, our 9-part interview, we have actually 3 interviews, but the last one, the third, was a 9-part interview that we just did. Check that out on our sister channel, which is Rock History Music. Links in the description. I'm John Beaudin. Make sure you comment on our videos, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos. This is Rock History Book.